And I'm Sonia Warshawski, my maiden name Grinstein. Our hometown's name is Międzyrzec in Polish, Międzyrzec Podlaski, and in Yiddish it's Mezrich. Before the war, it was really a very cultural Jewish town, you would call it, of the size. And more or less, we had a lot of freedom as far as, in the Jewish affairs. And our hometown had a very, very wonderful Jewish youth and a very high intellectual. And we were 3 children at home, and I'm the only one. I am the survivor, and my sister in Israel were 2 survivors. My mother was taken to Treblinka. My father and my brother were shot. So I am the only one, and my sister survivors from our, family, except a few cousins. We had really a very normal life, and a lot of laughter. And I went to school, a public school, which was mixed, Jewish and Catholic, and the majority was Catholic, naturally. And each, I'll give you an idea how in school, which here is not permitted, saying prayers, we had to stood every morning and to the prayers what the Catholic children were reciting. And each class had also Jesus Christ on the wall. And so it always reminds us that we're outsiders. Although we did have, like once a week, a Jewish teacher teaching us about our religion, and history. And getting more acquainted with our history, the Jewish history, most of our Jewish youth belonged to organizations which were, most of them, aiming for the future to be in Israel. This was something for me very important, that we came always to the meetings, and the history of our, the Jewish history was very, very important to us, and it gave us a lot of encouragement. And our hometown was first, the Russians came in. And then, I don't know in history if you recall, Stalin and Hitler had they arranged the different borders. So our hometown went through a trauma. After the Russians backed off, the Germans came in. And I want you to know, before the Russians left, you could go with them, and they were, ready, kind of warning you what you can expect when the Germans will come, because we knew already what was happening in Germany. But we did stay behind. A lot of Jewish people went along with the Russians, and they survived. Most of them survived in Siberia. When the Russians were asking, everyone, you could go with them. The only thing you could not take any belongings, really, like from your home, furniture and so on. And my father really foresaw things, and he was begging my mother that we don't need anything, just a little, small little trunk, whatever you call it, in a few belongings. So anyway, when the SS took over, then the killings started. They took out, the first thing went, the rabbis. They put them through the streets and killed them later. And the beards were, torn off, and it was horrible. And little by little, they started to, let's say, we were leaving, we had to move. We moved first to my grandma's place. And from there, they did it gradually to give, put us in the ghetto, but not right away because it took some time. So in the beginning, then we moved again to which they call it dzielnica żydowska. That means it was open. It was not a ghetto yet, but certain streets, there were only Jews were living. And so we knew that something horrible is coming. And we had to, of course, have our, yellow arm bands, whatever you call it, as a Jew. And you couldn't be certain times on the street. In the meanwhile, everyone had to have a job. You had to be, to survive, you had to work. You had to have a permit, that you are working someplace. Since our city, I want to point it out, was a very industrial city. We had our brushes and fur and leather. Our brushes were going all over the world, were shipped. So thanks to that, our hometown was surviving much longer than any others. So I was working in one of those brush factories, and my father was also having a job in a different, factory. When the first deportation took place in our hometown, there was not a ghetto yet. It was still the open ghetto. At that time, when all the Jews had to go out to the marketplace and sitting there, I went, but my father and my mother and my sister, they went into hiding. I went because I knew that I had this, since I was working, and I had this paper that, that I am, working, that I will be saved. And my brother was at that time already, thanks to my father, through connections, he was already working in it's an engineering place. So we both went to this, and while they were calling off our names, whoever worked in the factories, he just took off his armband, and he just walked off. He was a very heroic, young man. And walked off. There was the main, not public house, but city hall. City hall was right there by that, marketplace, and he hid there. So when I went back to the factory when they took us out, and I was in the attic watching, looking through when they were rushing our people to the trains. They rushed them not only they were rushing them so fast they had to run. Whoever couldn't run, they were shooting. The shootings were, till even now, I could hear the shootings. Shooting babies, shooting elderly, who whatever it was in August, it was already, very hot. And this was 1942. August, I think 25th, something like this. After this, deportation, I still had my family. They were hiding. That was a neighbor had a house, and between the house and another house, it was a very tiny alley, and they closed it up, and they were hiding there, and they survived this, deportation. So, the ghetto was found. We moved to one little room that only 2 beds could be, standing there. Let's say 1 bed and one was a couch, actually. And we had a little table and a little bitty, very lucky that we had a little stove, a tiny stove, I think, with 2, that you could cook on 2 platters, yeah. And I was still in the factory, walking out from every day, and my brother was, since he had this job, he was outside of the ghetto. He did not. He only came in, and but overnight they stayed in a special place. All of those boys with this, Polish engineer. So thanks to him, it was a big help because he could bring us in sometimes, some food and so on. The situation, in the ghetto was very horrible. I remember it was on New Year's. They just came in the ghetto and just for fun, killing from right to left. Just went in, and kill everyone who was in sight. So you was always under that, fear that maybe you will be next. So with this, we knew that somehow the end will come. We digged up in our little place under the floor. We had a hiding place. We had to go in almost crawling under the bed, and there was an opening, and we went in, You could not stay really many days there because there was not any air. But just in an emergency, we had this, and that was important. My sister, when they took us out from our hiding, for this was another deportation. When they took us out this particular day for this deportation, we had to kneel in the front of the house where they took us out, and they were bringing also from different hiding places some more of our people. And while we were sitting there, a guard was watching us, and my little sister was sitting just next to my father, and she was really falling apart. She felt, this is it, they're going to kill us, they're going to kill us. And some point, when the guard was maybe in 1 second looking away, my father pushed my little sister. There was a little door to a little alley, pushed her in, and she escaped. And then after we already got up to walk to the main, again to the marketplace for more, surrounded people, my father escaped in the last moment. And keep in mind that my brother was not at that time. And this was May the 3rd, 1943. My brother was still outside of the ghetto, so we knew that he's still alive. So my brother took my little sister to a farm, and he paid some special, money for whatever valuables for her to keep her. And he used to come each week and check on her. In meanwhile, when they killed my brother and my father, were in hiding. They were hiding on also in an attic at a Polish, house, and someone gave him out. They came and they shot my father and my brother. And when the farmer, the farmer got the news that he is not alive, they threw her out. When they threw her out, she was by herself in the forest. She was walking miles and miles until she came upon a very big partisan group, which were really already the Russians, what they escaped from the Germans' prisons. So she survived with them. After they took us out from the hiding, and we knew that, like I mentioned to you about my father and my sister, it's only me and my mother. And this was May the 3rd, exactly my brother's birthday was on May the 3rd. We were also taken again to the, to the marketplace. And from there, after they gathered, I don't know how many, still thousands of people, We were loaded, we walked to our train. They put us probably, I don't know how many, it was just like herring. They packed us in those, you know, cars in the train. And each boxcar had a very little bitty window, okay? And it was, you know, with wired. It was so packed and hot inside that a lot of the people were dying. I can recall when we went to one on a station at night, we stayed, you know, there for several hours. The thirst was so tremendous that just people were dying for thirst and heat. I was just a short little girl. I was wearing some boots, and we all had always prepared that I had some money in the boots if something happened. And I was standing on corpses to reach this little, you know, little window that I could just only bear one hand with my money stacked in my hand to give it to the Polish, you know, what they were by the train workers or whatever. And he handed me over one, how do you call it? The Boy Scouts have it too. You put water, a canteen, yes. And he gave me a canteen with that water. As soon as I pushed in that little canteen and I wanted just give a drink and give it to my mother, barely you could do it because everyone was dragging that canteen from you, you know, to get this. And by the way, when this particular train where I was on with my mom, it was going to Treblinka. Since Treblinka was so busy and the trains were still standing kilometers and kilometers, they turned our train to Majdanek. When we came to Majdanek, what a sight. They were selecting people right there while we were going, you know, beating us, you know, rushing out from the trains. And right there they were shooting all the elderly and children, as many, you know, they could. And then they took us to the shower room, you know, where they gave us a bed. And I was still with my mother. And they took all our clothes and everything, belongings, you know, belongings. We didn't carry any belongings, just what we had on our body. And there we wind up Majdanek. I was with my mother in Majdanek. Majdanek had a guest chamber, I want you to know. And some of the people, when after the selection, where they didn't got killed, they finished them off in the guest chamber. While in Majdanek we came, I was there since May the 3rd till late fall. This was a camp which we went through selections naturally, and we worked on the fields. You had to always, you know, you had to work, let's put it this way. And we, either on the fields or you carried the, at that time they didn't even have latrines, regular latrines, because the camp really was not organized really the way it should. So they had only holes. And dysentery, that's the way I pronounce it, was, you know, it was there. And I had dysentery there where I was. And if not my mother, I wouldn't have survived. Because lots of times, the only thing when you have this, you want to drink more water and more water. And more you drink, that will be the end of you. So she was holding me back and tried to, like we had a lot of still Polish, you know, Catholic girls in this camp, which they were allowed to get packages from homes, from their homes. And so she used to trade in like a piece of bread maybe for a little piece of a fruit or something, you know, a little piece of cake or something like this. And thanks to her, I survived the dysentery there. This was Majdanek. While we were there, there are in particular two girls, which they tried to escape, and they got caught. Those girls, one evening we had to stay all, in rows. It's like all 4 angles, okay? And this was in the middle, was a guillotine. And I'll never forget this in my life, were like 2 girls carrying their little, stools to the hanging. And we had to watch this. I remember when my mother was turning her head, the SS woman, when she was going around, she slapped her face that you had to watch it. And while those girls were hanging, in the last breath, they were crying to us not to forget and take revenge. So till the end of the summer, there was another big selection. You had to take off your clothes completely. And this was outside. The selection was taking place. When I came with my mother in front of him, he sent my mother to the left and me to the right. I don't know if you know what it means. The left was always to your death, and the right was still maybe hoping to another camp or again, to work. So my mother was taken away from me, and they sent me on the right side, which was supposedly will go to Birkenau, Auschwitz-Birkenau. While after this selection, they took us, all the girls, what they were selected to go to Birkenau, Auschwitz, to another field. And we stayed overnight. I'll never forget this in my life, in this particular big barrack. And in the morning, they made a Blocksperre. A Blocksperre meant everybody had to be inside. And they, usually with a big whistle, they let you know. You had to be all inside. When this happened, we knew always something is occurring. So I want you to know that this was all the women, they were selected to their death to go to the gas chamber, were marching from that field where I was before. And I was very curious. I went, to the big door, what we had in this particular barrack, and I could only just a little space open and to look. And this was my last, vision of my mother when she walked to her death knowingly with another lady I'll never forget from my hometown too. They were kind of holding each other also, in rows of 5. So this was the night that I really fell apart before the next day they sent us, by the trains to Birkenau, Auschwitz. So this was, I lost my mother there. And the next episode is Birkenau, Auschwitz. When we came to Birkenau, Auschwitz, they put us like in a quarantine, they call it so. In this quarantine, we stayed, I don't know for how long, and the only work we did there is something to finish you off. Like you carried today the stones, bricks from here to another place, and that's what. And after this, I was selected to another barrack, which was Commando 22. And this commando was, we were working in the fields in the summer, and in the winter, I also want to tell you that when we came there, they usually what they did, even when you went to an entlausing, that means when you took the showers, they gave you clothes like for the summer, for the winter, winter for the, vice versa. So you had to always be on the ball, and maybe through connections to other girls where they worked with the clothes, some places you could get an extra, a little sweater or something, because otherwise you wouldn't make it. And so it was very, very like in hell over there. The rations were, you were getting a little soup, which was made just like water, watery with some kind of plants. I don't know, I cannot tell you. Once in a while, if there was like Christmas, you'll maybe fish out a little piece of potato. This was, you know, something very unusual. The ration was like 2 slices of bread all day, and sometimes they would give you just a little piece of margarine or a little, you know, some kind of gel, or I don't know, jelly or something. And this was your ration. Auschwitz, Birkenau was also, you went through a lot of selections. So I must went through about 3-4 selections.
How long were you in there?
In Birkenau, I came, you know, end of fall in 1943, and I stayed till 1945 in January. I stayed there till the Russians were nearing into Auschwitz-Birkenau. They took all of us who was able to walk, still in pretty good shape. We got 1 blanket and a ration of 1 can. I think this was some kind of meat, you know, horse meat. I think, yeah, horse meat, and a portion of bread. I cannot tell you exactly if it was a half bread or a whole bread. And you know, we had wooden shoes naturally, and they took us. We walked for days and days, and already in the snow. After this, they put us also in open cars, you know, cattle cars, and this was in the winter, mind you, and all we had is just 1 little blanket, and the snow was already falling, and we were driving in those, you know, with those trains. Don't ask me how many days. We probably went through all Germany. We would see at night the flickers from the red, you know, those the homes. You can imagine our feelings as someone is sitting in a house in a warm place. And meanwhile, while it was taking place, this, you know, driving us, it was already a lot of bombing, you know, the bombing from the Americans or the English, I don't know. And the bombing places were not too far from us, but for some reason, we didn't care, even they bombed us. But we went on until we came to, finally, to Dachau. In front of the Dachau, we were segregated, like half of the women went to Bergen-Belsen, and half of the women, whatever, went to Gross-Rosen. I fell into Bergen-Belsen. When I came to Bergen-Belsen, I want you to know, Bergen-Belsen did not have a gas chamber. They had a crematorium. They did not need a gas chamber because the typhus and the malnutrition was so great that the girls were just dying as like flies. And luckily, in Bergen-Belsen, I fall in, it was my luck, to work in not in the kitchen because I was not strong, you know, enough, but in the shell where you're in a peeling room. It was just like also like a barn, and you were peeling there, you know, all kind of rudebakers mainly was our, you know, and they had them piles, you know, in the front. I tried also, even they checked us before we went back to each evening, because the kitchen, I want to explain to you, was outside of the regular camp. So we had to walk each evening back to camp, and then in the morning they brought us to that kitchen, okay? In the front, across from the kitchen, was the men's camp. Bergen-Belsen was also like you. I don't think they will send me anymore to hell, because I was in hell already. You could see every day columns, I mean just piles and piles of dead bodies. And the men with themselves already looked like, you know, skeletons, and they were dragging all those dead people to the crematoriums. And we were lying on the floors there. And at night, if you had to go out to the latrine, you had to almost step in on some of the girls. One day, when we were at work, we noticed that something is happening. We did not see that many SS women being there in the kitchen where they usually guard us, and a man also, SS men. So we knew something is going on, and already whispers that the liberation is someplace not too far away. I was very curious, and I was sitting right, on a bench there with some other girls from France, where I remember. And we had, I explained to you, it was like a barn at a very, very wide opening, like a, door. And I was very uneasy. I said, well, I will go out to the latrine, and you could have a longer view, because Bergen-Belsen also a very big camp. And while I was there looking out, because you could hear already the noise from the earth, that something is coming, like how do you call it? The vibration, yes. The vibration of the tanks. You could hear tanks are coming. And I knew this must be our liberation. I was so excited until, coming in back to my place, to this in the barn. And meanwhile, where does the Hungary go? I mentioned to you before, the men's camp was just across. They opened pried the doors, the gates, and they all were piling to the kitchen. So while, they were all piling, the guard was still guarding in front of the kitchen. And I was trying, all the girls were very excited, and I want to, already tell them too that I have seen, the tanks are coming. And I was standing just like this, and he was shooting from a very short, distance, and the bullet, came in through here and came out through here, a centimeter from my heart, centimeter from my lungs. And meanwhile, outside, the English were already there, and they had all of these women, where I showed you here, can I show it, again? They were all standing, out there on the platform, and the main assessment who ran the camp, he was all standing with their hands up. And I'll never forget in my life, when I got the bullet, you just don't notice, you don't know what happened to you. I just felt something like, and I noticed blood is coming out of I didn't even notice this place. I noticed that I have blood coming out of my mouth. I want you to know that I was drinking that blood, just thinking, God, after I went through so much, in the day here in the liberation, I have to perish. In the meanwhile, I'll never forget, a Russian man who came in from the camp, one of our, inmates, and he picked me up, and he took me to the, to the window in the kitchen, and he said in Russian to me, look out and see, before you die, the liberation. And then after this, they took me out on the front of the kitchen. This was April the 15th, the Liberation Day, and it was still cold. They had to, strip me, and the first aid, the English doctor from the army gave me the first aid. And I was lying, I don't know how long, on the soil, on the ground, until they took me to the camp. And meanwhile, I want to explain to you, since this was in the camp, and the English, they had to move us from the typhus and from all of the, dead bodies. We went through a disinfection, and the Red Cross trucks took us to another destination, which was before like Leavenworth here, an army, what do you call it, not prison, no. They were actually living there, the soldier, army barracks. And there were very nice buildings, actually buildings, a lot of buildings. And there, you know, we came. Some of the girls, like in my situation, or they were typhus or something, they were assigned to so-called hospitals, which the English, you know, were tending to it. And some of the girls, when they were on a man, they were still healthy enough. They were given, you know, places to live in those also in those buildings.
How long were you in the hospital?
Well, it's hard, you know, really to define, you know, how many weeks and weeks, you know, I was there until I was able, you know, to walk out. And from there on, you know, life was still, you know, we were in a camp like the DP camp, which you call it, and the English, you know, they gave us proviant and clothes until you got on your feet, and later on you went on your own.
What happened after you left the camp? Where did you go from there?
After I left the camp, first I went, one man from my hometown showed up looking for, you know, for his sister and so on, telling me, bringing me regards that my sister survived. So you can imagine this was my first, you know, thing to do. I went back to Poland, to my hometown, and this was just, you know, eerie, because the trains were not going, you know, normal, nothing. And we had to sometimes go with the Russian soldiers on trucks, you know, for traveling. And it was very, very hard for you to understand how it was really was. And there wasn't any borders yet, nothing. And I came to my hometown after the war to see my sister. After I found my sister, I did not want to stay on in Poland. My hometown was to me like a ghost town. Wherever I was walking there, I could go back with memories from my family, memories from my friends, my girlfriends, you know, students from school. So it was too difficult. I didn't want to, you know, stay on. But my sister stayed on, and finally she did marry before I decided to go back, with this idea that they will come later. And I went back to the English zone, to Bergen-Belsen. And there I met my future husband. After the camp, Bergen-Belsen, you know, from the DP camp, I moved because my husband and his family, they went to Bad Nauheim, to the American zone, which was a better zone to go on, looking on the future if you wanted to get out of Germany. And our first child was born there. So when we came here, I was pregnant with my another child. We came here assigned to Kansas City from New York because John's, my husband's two sisters and brother were already here. So automatically they sent us to Kansas City.